Yeah, we are live also.
A very good evening to all the members of the Bombay Orthopedic Society and all the viewers of this webinar. We are speaking about a very interesting topic today, which is stress in our lives. As doctors, we hear about it from our patients, we help them deal with it, and we treat it. But are we ourselves affected by it? Are we ourselves getting stressed out because of a lot of uncertainties in practice, in family life, and personal lives? Hence, to decipher this code today, we have a very special speaker. But before going on to the talk, may I now call upon the Honorable President of the Bombay Orthopedic Society, Dr. Sangeet Gawale, to give the opening statements. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Swapnil. Good evening, everybody. I hope the festival went well and all have enjoyed. As we are going back to normal practice and our normal routine with the face-to-face surgeries, patients clinic, and our routine rounds. So probably our stress levels are going to increase, and exactly on that, our guest speaker, Dr. Rachna Singh, is going to speak how to balance mind and wellness. And she is head of the Department of the Holistic Medicine and Wellness at the Artemis Hospital. I welcome you, Dr. Rachna Singh, and Dr. Tushar Agrawal will be in conversation with her. Over to you, Tushar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. We are all honored to be here, and I'll just share my screen to introduce ma'am. So I hope this is all visible.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, great. So we are yet again on one of the Adapt and Evolve program, which is a very revolutionary program by any orthopedic society to be done. Probably one of the most novel things Bombay Orthopedic Society has done. And I'm very fortunate that I could actually reach out to Dr. Rachna Singh, and at a very short notice, she so kindly agreed to give us this lovely talk. She has a very great background, a huge background of 25 years of being in the area of mental wellness. So she's a mental wellness expert. She has been a TED Talk speaker. She has got plenty of clinical background. She focuses on all aspects of psychology, relationship, lifestyle, stress management. And she is a HOD, like Dr. Sangeet said, of the Artemis Hospital, Gurgaon. She is also the founder and director of the Mind and Wellness Studio at Delhi. And she's an executive board member of the NGO Sarv Samman, which aims at empowering children, youth, and women. She's been a corporate healthcare consultant with each and every corporate, leading being Amazon, Ericsson, HCL, Hero Honda, Pepsi, Coke, and she focuses on wellness and soft skills training. Besides that, she's also associated with innumerable number of schools and police as well. She's got numerous awards to her credit. My introduction, however, to her was through her book, which happened to be sent to me, through the AI work of the Amazon. And then I got so interested in the book, because if you read the introductory page of the book, it asks you questions. Are you stressed? Do you long for extra couple of hours in a day? Are you able to unwind and relax at night? Do you have trouble sleeping every night and find it difficult to get a sound sleep? Is maintaining a healthy lifestyle becoming a challenge for you? Does getting up and going to work seems like a mammoth task to you? Do you face challenges at work with your co-workers? Have you ever had a tough boss to deal with? Have you been caught in the whirlpool of office gossip or politics? And do you have negative thoughts? Do worries become a part of your daily life? And she says that if you have an affirmative answer to any one of the questions also, then this book is for you. And I honestly felt that I have an affirmative answer to probably each and every question here. And the paradigm, what she talks about is that of the changing society, of the unhealthy competition in workplace, of this habit of manipulating relationships, of trying to keep up a false image, which actually becomes stressful for her. As we already know, she is an accomplished orator. So we're going to be sitting back and really listening to a great talk, following which she has agreed to a brief Q&A session also. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tushar, for having me. I know this was very quick, but it all worked out very well. And thank you, all of you, for sitting here on a Sunday evening and listening to this. And thank you for the warm introduction. And also, I think Dr. Swapnil for also coordinating it very rapidly to get this done very, very smoothly. I'm here with you for almost the next hour with all of you. And the purpose for me being here is I would just like to take this in a little bit of a workshop style versus kind of just lecture style, because that is something I think now we all have the privilege of sitting back and pressing a button and listening to everybody on YouTube. You could just YouTube us and listen to us. But Dr. Tushar, thank you so much for the lovely way you've mentioned the book. And yes, it's doing brilliantly well. Bloomsbury, which is the Harry Potter and Eat, Pray, Love, people had reached out to me right the pandemic and wanted me to pen down something so that we could look at looking at how we can bust our stress in more meaningful ways. And I think this is a whole load of surgeons sitting there listening. And more than that, I think we're all human beings at the first platform, before even donning the garb of a doctor. And yes, I think at some point of time, we all kind of forget and the lines become very blurred. But having said that, COVID has brought a big reality check to all of us. And if it hasn't, then I think it's time that we should all get a good reality check for ourselves also for the way forward in life. So just let's just go to the presentation, Dr. Tushar.
Yeah, Dr. Agni.
Thank you so much for doing this and flipping the presentation, because although I am speaking to you currently from my clinic, the Mind and Wellness Studio, but we have no staff here on Sundays and so on. And, so just let's go to the next slide, please. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So I think we all are very aware that, according to the DALIs, the mental illness is the most disabling illness, causing large amounts of morbidity and mortality in the world. Next, please. I think everybody is absolutely aware of these statistics from the WHO that 1 in every 4 people suffer from some mental health concern or the other. But having said this, all evolutionary psychologists have been mapping through the pandemic, and now we have figures close to 1 in every 2 people. So those are the latest stats which are going to be released, I think, soon enough. And that means literally every second or third person sitting here listening is having some mental health concern or the other, and we are grappling with something at a very large level. Next, please. Have a look at these stats. They are not here so that you can get, I haven't put them because for anybody to get frightened. They're very gory stats. But the good part is if you look at the one below, it says that over 80% of people with clinical depression do not receive any treatment. So if I was to reverse this, that if 80% of the people were to receive treatment, therapy, medicines, whatever it takes, we would not be looking at such stark, terrible statistical figures. Next, please. And I mean, one of the most shocking ones is that every hour a student committing suicide in India. And I hope with mental health becoming a priority for all of us now, with the pandemic having brought it completely to the forefront, I hope these stats don't look anywhere close to this. And I hope we don't even have 1 student a month, doing something like this. And I must tell you that during the entire pandemic, the number of kids, the number of students who reached out to us for counseling is absolutely exponential. Next, please. And the reason why mental illnesses have gone untreated and still go untreated is very, very much so the stigma and the lack of sensitization. And I think now we are understanding that, with mental health becoming a priority, and everybody from spiritual speakers to mental wellness experts to doctors, everybody, general physicians, surgeons, everybody's put it completely on the forefront, and they are understanding that this is something which we can't negate anymore. Of course, mind and body always went, together, and we have no denial to the mind, body, spirit, or soul equilibrium as well. But having said that, yes, the stigma has been there, and gradually we're seeing that. I mean, and more so, earlier it was gradual, but now so I see that in the last 5 years, more so in the last 2 years, it has gone down a lot. And I'm speak for myself in Delhi NCR, and I don't think there's nobody from any walk of life who I may not have seen as a client or a patient, whether they are, the top-notch politicians, film stars, models, CEOs of various top companies. I think everybody is learning how to prioritize this now. Next, please. So we do understand that today we all are sitting and discussing about mental wellness and health. And earlier, maybe about a decade ago, we wouldn't bother, or 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't bother at all. But we do understand to maximize the potential, to understand, to have a good 360-degree holistic well-being, well-rounded life, a good joyous life. It is very important to improve the mind, body, and spirit equilibrium. Next, please. And we're not talking about mind, body, soul, and spirit only anymore. We are looking at the 6 dimensions of wellness, which is environmental, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, social, and physical. And we are clearly saying if you are not well in even 2 of these aspects, you are not going to feel completely well, you're not going to feel enjoy, you're not going to feel well enough. So please have a look at these 6 aspects. And Dr. Tushar, tomorrow I shall share a video with you, which is a 4.5-minute clip. I done that for the UAE, and it's now playing at all the, some time ago, it was actually playing at all the airports. So I'm going to, send this across, and if you can, it'll be great for you to just, share it with everybody also. So like I said, we're going to, keep this more like a workshop style. And I mean, I hope all of you will end up interacting, because the only way you're going to get maximum out of this next, half an hour, 45 minutes is when we put our mind to ourselves. And this entire half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour is just about you. So this is not about your colleagues, not about your family, but this is just to bring yourself into focus. Next, please. So, of course, we all understand that the biggest killer in the world today, accounting for over 80% of deaths worldwide, is lifestyle. And we all know the lifestyle factors. But next, please. I want everybody to have a look at this, please. Next, please. What do you think is wrong with your lifestyle? Is there anybody who thinks there's nothing wrong with their lifestyle? Please type. Anybody? We'll also be happy to hear. And even if you think there's nothing wrong, I always feel there's some scope for improvement. So, I think we can all feel free to start typing in. Dr. Tushar, if I miss out what people are typing, I would request you to just read.
I will.
Okay, thank you for being so kind and supportive. So just quickly, let's just see, like I said, let's understand what is wrong with our lifestyle. Anybody like to type and share? I understand this is a forum full of colleagues, but I think there is some amount we can share, because then only we're going to get the benefit.
The question should be rephrased. Is something right with our lifestyle?
No, then we're going to look at some different aspects. But if anybody would, let's understand. Okay, Dr. Tushar said competition. Anybody else? Anyone else? I can't read the chat.
I've also written that we tend to get extremely busy.
Okay, so work-life, Dr. Swapna is saying work-life balance, absolutely. Anybody else? And we were just talking about it before we went live, actually. Uday is saying lack of balance. Stressful, Dr. Kshitij is saying. Anyone else? Okay, so even if you can't share, I want you to start identifying as I speak along, because only, like I said, only when we identify the problem, are we going to find the solutions to it. So no point going ahead until we really know what are we really grappling with. So it's very important. So don't worry about your spouse's lifestyle, your child's lifestyle, your partner's lifestyle. Look into what do you think is wrong with your lifestyle. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So very important to identify for each person. Next, please. So faulty lifestyle is nothing but stress, a faulty diet, sedentary life, smoking, alcohol, all boiling down to a large number of illnesses ranging from psychiatric, neurological, cardiovascular, cancers, and so on. Next, please. And of course, adding to this is the pressure to perform, busy schedules, peer pressure, and urbanization. This is exactly what you all said, competition, work-life balance, and so on. Next, please. So quickly, today this is a presentation which we are discussing about how are we going to, manage our stress in a slightly better way. And you see this picture over here. And next, please. So this is, I just didn't want to be gender biased. So we have a male picture and a female picture. So quickly, anybody would like to share, what do you think? This clearly, the caption says stress. So what do you think is causing this guy's stress in one word? Very quickly. Fantastic. Dr. Tushar, thank you. So multitasking is what is causing this gentleman stress. Thanks, Dr. Swapnil. So how many tasks do you think the brain is allowed at one point of time to do before we declare that it's getting stressed? Dr. Tushar is saying 4. Any guesses? We wild guesses also will do. So guesses, please, you can go on. How many tasks is our brain allowed to do at one given point of time? Dr. Uday, 2, 3 to 4. Dr. Swapnil, someone said 1. I lost that person's name earlier. Shubhransh, 1. Yeah. Okay. So the answer is it's 2. So Dr. Swapnil and Dr. Tushar, आप बहुत सारे tasks करते हो एक बारी में and think you're not getting stressed. That's not true at all. And that is the reason why we end up getting stressed, is because at each given point of time, we're doing way more than what is the permissible limit. So what does that mean? That means I'm looking into my phone right now. I have one laptop open. I am, then going to be thinking, what am I eating for dinner tonight? Whom am I going to speak to? What do I have to, prepare for tomorrow morning? What's happening on the cases? Somebody may have presentations and so many things. So this is what happens, and that is the reason why the brain starts getting very, very stressed and tired. Next, please. So what is stress? It is nothing but the physiological and psychological response of the body to a situation that is perceived to be harmful. Next, please. So quickly, so there's how beautifully everybody answered earlier. I want now everybody to look into themselves and see what is it that you feel when you are stressed. Kindly look into yourselves and not people around you who are residing with you, what happens to them when they get stressed or what happens to your team. No. Okay. Dr. Agnivesh, anger. Dr. Uday, dreadful. Irritation. Fantastic. Go on. So the more you interact, the better it will be. So so anybody else who would like to share what is it that they feel when they get stressed, overwhelmed? Anyone else? Okay, so for everybody's ease, I have divided this into the signs and symptoms into various buckets. Now we all realize that you will all realize that every person feels something similar or something different from what you may be feeling. It is extremely important to understand what is your stress response, because if you don't know that, you're not going to be able to manage. So management comes a lot later. The stress management first is the identification. So look at this slide. So I've divided this into the emotional symptoms, which is irritability, anger, गुस्सा आना, चिड़चिड़ाहट होना, डर लगना, रोने का मन करना, sadness, and so on. Next, please. Next is the cognitive symptoms, which are the symptoms of the mind. So difficulty in concentration, focusing, and this is something which you are getting a lot, by the way, in the pandemic now, where you feel like you don't feel good, you don't feel like you're able to focus on your task, the productivity levels are low. We are having, ruminative patterns of thinking, like brooding. Next, please. The somatic symptoms. So disturbances in sleep, it could be increased sleep or decreased sleep. It could be some people feel very hungry under stress. Some people lose appetite. So thereby, difficulty in digestion, aches, pains, easy fatigability, and so on. Next, please. And of course, the behavioral symptoms. And this is something, again, which we are feeling a lot. And this is something which is a constant complaint that I keep getting from friends, family, patients, is the impaired motivation. सुबह उठ के मन नहीं करता कुछ करने का. So it's not really a depressing feeling. It is a feeling which we have all termed now as languishing. So what are we going to learn is we are going to learn from languishing to flourishing. That is what we are actually grappling with at this current point of time, post the pandemic. And of course, absenteeism at work or reduced performance, increased usage of substances, caffeine, alcohol, smoking. And, we have this very famous Devanand song, which says ki har fikr ko dhuएं में उड़ाता चला गया. Well, that is totally not true. Those are absolutely, the coping mechanism, that's a negative. These are all negative coping mechanisms versus having positive coping mechanisms. Next, please. So just to again bifurcate this further, next, please. So what we've done is bifurcated it into further buckets. So you could just, if all of you, if whoever's got a pen and paper, you could write on your phone, you could just, for your own self, now that you've identified, some of you've identified what is it that you feel when you are under stress, please put this into these buckets. So it could be self-related, it could be couple, it could be parenting, elderly, work-life balance, and so on. Next, please. Of course, we've all dealt with feelings of anger, hopelessness, anxiety, frustration, erratic sleep, exercise patterns, a sense of constriction, which I think all of us, and the constant feeling of fear, which I think is kind of not even leaving us, because the moment we try to put baby steps back into normalcy, we have some fear or the other gripping us, and we're dealing with a lot of emotions as a population, where, what happened to us in lockdown 1.0, 2.0, what we had a sudden sense of, challenge. We took it in a very positive way. We said, all right, we're going to get through this. And, everybody, virtually everybody, put down positive mechanisms to cope up. So, people thought it's great. We are going to sit home and have lunches with the family. We don't have to go to work. The commute finished. All that was going on. We were reaching out to people all over the world, friends, family, playing Antakshari, Ludo, reaching out to our, old hobbies and so on. So there was a sense of cheer at that time also. There was a hope, positivity. But by the time lockdown 3.0 and 4.0 happened, we all understood that this virus wasn't going to go away that soon. So then we started to grapple with a sense of disappointment, insecurity at work. And I'm sure all of your surgeons would have gone through a lot of havoc because, not being able to go perform surgeries. There's an insecurity at workplace. We don't know what's going on. For us, mental health experts, our work just went haywire. Everything shifted to a virtual platform. So we were grappling with a lot of things. And then by Jan 2021, we started to take baby steps into walking into normalcy. Everybody started going for vacations. We started to go out to eat, only to know what hit us in April 2021, and which was, I think, one of the most disastrous experiences I think anybody would have gone through. It was literally at a war footing. I know Mumbai was really bad as well. Delhi was absolutely crazy, where people were, fighting for beds, desperation, remdesivir. That's all what we were hearing, all throughout. So it was a very, very difficult environment. And now, yet again, we again, started to move back with a sense of normalcy. We're saying that we possibly have reached the endemic stage, but we still don't know. And we just hear yesterday as of what has started to happen in Bangalore and Karnataka. So there is lots which is going on. So we are obviously shifting sometimes from a hybrid work mode to suddenly now we don't know what's around the corner in the next couple of months. So there is a sense of constant change, which also brings along a sense of anxiety and fear. Next, please. And yes, it's been very hard for some people and on the relationship front. And I have a radio show running with Radio Mirchi Ishq. Now I do it only about once a week, and earlier I was doing it before the pandemic. It was running about almost 3 to 4 times a week, and people would dial in and ask their questions about their relationships. And I do the weekly column for Times of India. So I do the Ask the Expert online section with Times of India every week. And we have seen how the trend of questions has altered in these last 2 years. And where I was just talking to you people and saying that 1.0, 2.0, we were enjoying with the families. But what started to happen latter half of 2020, in fact, the cases of domestic violence and the number of divorces filed in have been exponentially high. So not only as a couple, even any difficult relationship, the dormant issues came up, whether it was siblings, whether it was parent-child, and so on. And we've seen a huge amount of increased discord as well. Next, please. And of course, parenting, I think, has been an absolute challenge for most people. Sitting with little kids on a Zoom call, helping them, to children who went to university in 2020, still haven't seen the face of college, to kids who finished their 12th standard. My own daughter finished her 12th boards. We didn't even know whether the boards were happening, what was going on, gone away to university without us having to, leave her there. So it's been very challenging. And I'd say for these kids, these been these are milestone years. They never went back to their school to meet anybody. And for us, it's still another 2 years gone by. Next, please. And of course, I think the most vulnerable section, the elderly, is something which we've all understood they need utmost care, and also they are the ones who are the maximum socially alienated, and there was a lot of loneliness, and they couldn't go for their daily laughter clubs and walks and so on. So next, please. I think this is something I want all of you to just focus on. So this is, some of the losses which we have experienced is, of course, leaving aside the amount of grief we all went through in the second wave. And so many people lost their near and dear ones. And I think there was nobody who didn't face fear and grief at that time. But more than that, I think what we've all dealing with is a loss of control, loss of routine and predictability, loss of independence and freedom, not knowing about the future. So these are a lot of losses that we are dealing with as a population. And of course, next, please. So yes, we've all shifted. Everybody shifted to online mode today. We're all sitting nicely and listening to a Zoom a call, whereas otherwise this may have been a physical, present meeting. So yes, things have altered a lot. Next, please. So reduced team cohesiveness, fear of losing jobs, reduced face-to-face interactions, isolation, loneliness, and so on. Next, please. Erratic schedules, a lot of confusion, blurring lines between work and home front, which is something, I think this is something a lot of the corporate sector has experienced. They didn't know when they were starting to work, when they were finishing. So it was a tough bet. Next, please. And this is a study quoted, which has been done by Everett, which is, I think, one of the largest studies done in the pandemic, which had 130,000 people participating, talked about the employee experience, what was happening in COVID-19. So high workloads, extended hours, stress, anxiety, and effectively burnout. Next, please. So just have a look at this slide. Okay. So now next, please, we're going to talk in the next few minutes about stress management. So far we have been talking about the other aspects. Next, please. So like I shared with you people earlier, we're looking at three main aspects: the awareness, the balance, and the control. That's what we call the ABC strategy. Next. So A is the awareness, what we talked about, that what causes us stress, what is it that is causing stress to you, identifying that, how do you end up reacting to it. Next. How are we going to balance the positive and negative sides? Because we do understand that it is very, very important to have stress also, which is the EU stress. So what we've been talking about up till now is the distress. So it is very, very important to have some amount of stress in our lives to get up, get going in the morning, going to work, getting up, getting out of bed, performing, doing for you people a good surgery, for us, making sure our patients are doing well, for kids, making sure that they are, reaching their class on time, presenting their work on time, and so on. So having said that, these are the few things that, we need to learn to balance with. Next, please. And then now we are going to talk about the control measures. So how are we going to take care of our stress? Next, please. So looking at few stress management strategies and techniques from here. But before that, before I go on to stress management, which is, I would rather have you people ask me certain questions, and then I will also come back to helping you with this. So let's open the house also for some Q&A, Dr. Tushar, if that works well.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, madam?
Please go on, because it will just make it more fruitful,
Yeah.
Because each person will have. Yeah, please go on.
In my readings, I have understood that some part of our mental health or our ability to remain happy is actually genetic. So 50% of it is genetic, 10% is environmental, and 40% is our effort. Do you have a take on that?
So not necessarily, Dr. Tushar. So, we all understand that at the end of the day, even if there is a genetic factor, we are not talking about mental illnesses per se. If we are talking about stress, there is not necessarily a genetic factor attached to it. And also it is very important to understand that now the fact that we are all talking about that it is completely in your hands to take charge of your life. So I don't think it's that 40% anymore. In fact, it's actually that 80%. It's about taking charge of how am I going to react? How am I going to deal with things? Of course, we are all thrown curveballs all day long. In fact, there is, I don't think ऐसा कोई भी इंसान है जिसने कभी तनाव महसूस नहीं किया हो, या stress या tension, जो हम common parlance में बोलते हैं. Everybody experiences this on a day-to-day basis, So it is very, very important to understand that it's the control button is in your hand and not in the genes.
There's a question which says that when we say being happy, does it come without being under stress? I guess what he is meaning is that whenever we are happy, we are not having stress, something like that. Or whenever we are stressful, we are not capable of being happy.
I would just request the speaker. Actually, I missed the question. If they could just, ask themselves, or if they'd be better understood then.
No, I'll just rephrase what Tushar said. The question per se. The viewer is asking, when we say being happy, does it come without being under stress? Means that is happiness a complete absence of stress? And the second part of the question is stress related to the habit of not being able to say no at the right time? So these are
No, so these are two different questions.
questions. That is correct.
Yeah. So let's understand one thing. There is something called the happiness quotient. I think everybody is talking about it, and everybody's understood the happiness quotient, and we all understand that. So we all saying, that for example, countries like Bhutan, their happiness quotient is at the highest, right? And we've now introduced a happiness curriculum in schools as well. So definitely, so when we are talking about distress, when we are talking about the negative stress, certainly we cannot be happy when the stress levels are very high. Certainly, we need to make sure that our stress levels are controlled or in control to make sure that we are happy. And then again, there's a big difference in happiness and pleasure. So there is a big difference there. And, for the gentleman who's asking the question, it's a nice idea for you to go back and just read a little bit on about what is happiness and what is pleasure. So pleasure is something which will give us instant gratification. So that, and we people as a population, our mind is playing tricks for us now to kind of blur the lines. So for example, when I find my favorite dress on sale, suddenly I'm walking at the mall, I'm like, wow, that's pleasure. That's not happiness. So we need to identify that also. And for also, when you're asking a question that when you're saying happiness, what does happiness mean to you? So a large portion is also very, very relative. For somebody sitting at 8:30 p.m. on a Sunday, listening to this could mean happiness. For another person sitting at 8:30 p.m. on a Sunday, listening to this would be saying that you're taking the joy away from my life, sitting on a Sunday evening and doing this, right? So it is completely relative, but very importantly, very important to identify that what does happiness mean for you. And it's not simple at all. And I think there's an entire spiritual quotient to it. And that is the reason why now we are not focusing only anymore on the IQ and EQ. Now we're also looking at the SQ. So IQ plus EQ plus SQ is what is going to make us a rounded individual and possibly also going to make sure that we get sufficient amount of happiness.
I have one more question, madam. Does being religious make you happier?
It is a complete choice. It's a complete choice. It's very much like saying that, does eating chili chicken make you happy? Or does watching a movie make you happy? It's a complete choice. But yes, let me tell you one thing. I don't know the person who's asking about this question, but I think where he may be coming from is if you are drawing a parallel to religion in some way to discipline. Yes, if you're saying having a more disciplined life, if you're talking about maybe praying, if you're saying that, grounding. So it's not necessary that we need to be religious to be happy. But I can't say that an atheist is not happy. So religion is only relative. It's a factor which is relative. But yes, if you ask about praying, certainly praying releases a lot of positive hormones. Now, that does not mean that I am praying to a particular religion. I'm not talking about that. I could simply be praying to the chant of a breath. I could simply be just looking at the energy system. And I think now there is no debate about the energy system at all. In fact, quantum physics is also talking about the energy system and the energy fields. And we all know that there is a certain energy system which is making the entire world go around, right? And the energy system is what kind of collapsed. And that's one of the reasons why something like the pandemic hit us as a population, because I think we all saw that very beautiful WhatsApp floating in the beginning, which had the earth with a band-aid, which said that the earth has stopped, for repairs. But actually it's the human population which had just been put to a full stop for repairing. So there's a very deep connotation. So like I said, so religion, we can't draw a parallel, a direct parallel, but yes, chanting, praying, grounding exercises, immense importance for positive mental health and for reducing stress.
I'll ask one more question, madam. In the book
Please.
by Sean Anker, the book is called The Happiness Advantage. So he says that being happier first is very useful for achievement. If you are an unhappy person to start with, then you tend to achieve less. And I have also read books which say that remaining persistently happy in your life is an unrealistic thought. Means you are never going to be happy at all the times. So am I making myself clear what I'm asking? One group is saying that you should be happy to start with in life in order to achieve things in life. And the other group is saying that being persistently happy in life is an unrealistic thought process. You are never meant to be persistently happy.
Happiness is not an end product. It is a journey. So I could be feeling happy and joyous sitting doing what I am doing right now. So it's not about if I'm happy, thereby I will do this, or if I do this, thereby I will be happy. It is a journey, and it along with the journey, if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, if joy equals to happiness for me, then that is what it is. It's not about whether the chicken came first or the egg. It's not a chicken egg story. It is a story where you're walking hand in hand with it. And of course, there is no way that constantly can we be in a state of elation or happiness. That's not even a possibility. It's like saying, what is work-life balance? If you visualize a balance, a tarazu, right? So if you say एक पलड़े में आपने work डाला, दूसरे में आपने life डाला, it doesn't mean that the balance is constantly at the same, not at all. It means that there are certain days one will be higher and there are certain days the other one will be higher. So similarly, there are certain days our moods will be better, certain days won't be better. But yes, if we can ensure that a baseline is good, that is what we need to attempt at. And then, of course, the graph keeps moving to and fro through the day. It's just that we need to make sure that the minimalistic swing closer to baseline is what we need to actually attain. And of course, people who meditate, people who are, highly evolved, people who are spiritual people, wise people, those people, they stay close to baseline. They are the ones who are grounded. So what does that mean? Na hi bahut khush hote hain, na hi bahut sad hote hain. So I will not jump with joy for something, and I will not even feel so sad with another aspect. So my entire graph will not peak so much in the plus, nor will it peak so much in the minus. That is the attainment of a grounded state or a balanced state.
Quickly, madam, thanks for answering that, madam. That was great. Quickly, one more question which come is that does social media play a negative role rather than a positive contribution?
Okay, so I think this is a thank you for asking this, else we would have just brought it up in any which way. So social media is definitely a double-edged sword. It goes without saying. And now, of course, a lot of people are blaming social media for bringing, aspects of anxiety, depression. The problem is not the social media. The problem is we don't know where to cut it off. That's the problem. And for us people, what I hear and what I understand, and like right before we started to speak, and I was sharing with you that day before, the entire day I was in a conference with Sister Shivani, Gaur Gopal Das, Dr. Mickey Mehta, who's also incidentally from Mumbai, Luke Coutinho. We all were together through the day, and we shared a lot. And I mean, it is I think this is one debate which was a constant debate, that what is social media doing. So in fact, Sister Shivani was saying, Brahma Kumari Shivani, she was saying that we're the last of the generation, absolute last of the generation who have seen a lot, because we've seen the transition. The new generation which has come, they don't know anything. They have no idea about a life without devices, which is true. They don't know. So what's happened actually is what I also see in practice all day long, is that the younger generation, the millennials, the new Gen X, Z, they are they don't know where to cut themselves, and what they have a different virtual life and a different real life, and they don't know where is the line. They don't know how to draw a line. They cannot operate without social media. That's what the concern is. That's actually where it's hurting us as a society. But let's say if I was to monitor myself and say, okay, maybe half an hour in the morning or half an hour in the evening or an hour in the morning and evening, I'll look at what's happening. Of course, there's nothing wrong in it. So neither can I can't say. So the same story goes for news, because there was a constant thing we were saying in media when the second wave hit, that please do not watch the news more than once or twice a day. That is because we are saying that is the nutrition for your mind. And if we are going to feed negative stuff to our mind, it's like if I'm constantly having a bad diet, if every day I'm only going to eat puchka, golgappa and chaat, and then I'm saying my stomach is runny, of course it's going to run, right? So if all day long I'm only going to feed negative things to my mind is certainly going to react in a very negative way. So we were saying, please put a little bit of kind of a stop to news. Similarly, so that's what we are saying now, that please make sure that your social media is in balance. You're not looking at it more than twice a day or whatever you want to kind of curtail. And by the way, study has shown that in the pandemic itself, I think the average Indian was using social media up to 5 hours a day. So obviously we are going to forget what is reality, because we are only going to look at what people are doing on social media, where they are going, where they're eating, what they're wearing. And that's what becomes the reality of your mind. And so your mind will start playing tricks, and you don't know what is real and what is virtual. And thereby the increased number of cases of anxiety, depression, and unfortunately suicide.
Ma'am, we'll go ahead with the talk and then
Sure.
we'll
So I think we've covered, let's go to the next. So I think we've covered quite a lot. So, the main techniques we talk about is changing our thinking, changing our behavior, and changing our lifestyle. Next, please. So very, very importantly, positive thinking and reframing. And I think this is the question I keep getting asked every time. And why me? I think everybody is asking all, all people who are read in either mental health or spiritualism or any kind of people who are able to answer. Everybody's saying, how am I going to keep myself positive? Why is it that I'm not able to keep myself positive? Every morning I get so many WhatsApp messages saying, think positive, be positive, but how am I going to inculcate it? So please understand that it does not happen automatically. What happens automatically to us is the negative thoughts. That is the NAT, which is the negative automatic thoughts which keep flowing into our system. So positive thinking is not coming by natural to us. We need to incorporate and inculcate it. So it's like saying, so what do we do? So first and foremost, we do something which we say is put a positive intention. So it's like saying, let's say I want to lose 5 kgs of weight. If I keep saying every morning I want to lose 5 kgs of weight and I don't do anything about it, nothing's going to happen to my weight, right? So if I keep saying, oh, I should think positive, but I don't make an effort towards it, I certainly am not going to start thinking positive. What I need to do is make sure that I start putting a positive intention to say that here is my aim, this is my goal, and I'm going to make sure that I reach my goal. So similarly, when let's say if I want to lose a couple of kgs of weight, what am I going to do? I will enroll in a gym, start walking, stop, my sweets and fats. So I'm working towards it. So similarly, when I want to think positive, I am going to start working towards it by putting a positive, pure intention that this is what I want to do. And whenever I'm getting a negative thought, which is mostly along people get negative thoughts, I'm going to keep saying in my mind, delete or recall and cancel, and start to learn to replace with the positive thought. So please understand, when we think positive, our speech is also positive. When our speech is positive, our actions are positive. When my actions are positive, I am obviously going to attract only positive people, positive situations, positive circumstances. And if I reverse it around, if my if my thoughts are negative, if all the time I'm thinking, what is going to happen? Am I going to clear the paper? How is this going to be? What is this person going to talk about me? Am I going to speak right? Am I going to perform right? Am I going to do the surgery right? Then certainly I am only going to, when I'm thinking negative, I'm going to also have negativity in my speech, and that will automatically create negative actions. And when I have negative actions, I'm only going to attract negative situations, negative people, negative circumstances, because then I'm operating from a low energy, a different. So that, like I said, there is no debate about the energy field system anymore. It's like saying when you walk into a room full of people, how is it that you feel positive looking at somebody and you feel negative looking at somebody? Why is it that when we walk into a room where, let's say, Sadhguru sitting, or you walk into a beautiful Gurdwara, automatically you start feeling, or a nice place of worship, you start feeling positive vibe. That's because the energy is very high. And that is what we need to do to our individual self also. Next, please. And of course, changing our behavior, some good ventilation, getting organized. Next, please. So getting organized is a very, very important thing, developing some organizational skills, making sure we have a to-do list in place. These all reduce our stress.
Madam, here can I ask a question?
Can I just finish?
Yeah,
Just 2 minutes and then we can just take up the last bit. Thank you. Next, please. And of course, time management is again very, very important to have time management skills, learning how to say no, learning to delegate. Next, please. And like I said, ventilation. So it's very nice to have a support, a structure of friends and family. And, it's a very common saying that a problem shared is a problem halved. Does not mean you keep going knocking at people's door, but it is very important to have some confidence in your life. Next, please. Let's skip this. Next, let's skip this. Okay, next, please. I think this is something all surgeons are very well aware of, that what we need to do to our lifestyle. Yeah, so this is the basic mantra that we follow, positive mental health in today's times. So firstly, fixing a routine, a discipline. So making sure we are sticking to the biological circadian rhythm, and making sure that we are switching off our devices at night an hour or 45 minutes before sleeping. Physical exercise, there is no debate about it. 45 minutes to an hour of good physical exercise, which is, we all know it is known to release serotonin and endorphins. 10 minutes of breathing exercises every day. If you can do an entire set of the pranayam, which is fantastic, Anulom Vilom, Bhastrika, Kapalbhati, Brahmari, because that has the entire set. It also activates the thymus gland, so the lymphocytes are released as well, besides creating a mind-body equilibrium and besides releasing serotonin. So it's a fantastic form of exercise for about 10 to 15 minutes a day, and 10 to 15 minutes of simple mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness, and indulging in positive, activities. Like I said, all of us have reached out to some activity or the other, some age-old hobby which we had thrown away, and we started to learn new skills. We started to rejuvenate with our age-old hobbies. So those, it is known, research shows us that indulging in a hobby for about 2 hours a week, you can be assured that your stress levels are going to be down. And lastly, having a good support structure for family and friends. So with this, I close the presentation for the day. Actually, you can just move to the next, please. Next, please. Yeah, so these are some positive affirmations. I was talking about how we can convert our language to be more positive. So we've put this into different buckets. So this is the new language, and that's how the new language should look like. And this is not what I have created. This is Louise Hay, who's a master of positive affirmations, and all of you can choose to read it. And I think you can read her 101 affirmations, and if you read a little bit about it, you can pick up whatever is resonates with you, and you say, write it a few times, before sleeping at night, because that is what we need to feed our subconscious mind before we sleep at night, 15-20 minutes before sleeping. These are few things which should be said. So with this, I'll close the session for the evening. And last slide, please. I think this is about the book which we were talking. Next, please. Next. Yeah. So you can just, yeah. So if anybody wants, you can just pick it up from Amazon. So any one or two questions, I'll be happy to take them.
So, Madam, in your book, there is one of the character who sort of heals himself because of active journaling. So in a lot of courses that we do on personality development and success, this topic of journaling comes. What if journaling is difficult for you? Is there an alternative?
So journaling is not necessary. It's not necessary that we need to journal. Journaling is one of the methods, and we use it in our therapy practices also. And a lot of times, clients or patients come back to us and they say they find it hard. Then we help them within the session as well. We must know how to journal or must journal for a more joyous life. Not at all. It's just one method.
Swapnil, would you be having any questions?
Yeah, probably maybe the last question of the day. So
Yes.
This is essentially more relevant to orthopedic surgeons, especially those who are into clinical practice, who are into academics, and who are also into administration, like running their own hospitals, associations. Now, as you said, that managing 2 tasks at a time is what is the maximum you can do. So if your tasks per day, per hour, per minute are more than 2, do you delegate, or do you have any other formula, any other mantra by which these I can end up solving them?
I wish I did, but this is the truth. This is what research shows us. We should keep ourselves as minimalistically, keeping the number of tasks as minimalistic as possible. But if we know that this is how our life is and we can't do anything, around it, first is we must make an effort to minimize. So just by saying I'm not going to, this is how my life is and I won't make an effort, that's also a wrong, perspective. So one is to make an effort to minimize. Second is that, let's say that, I feel that I am doing a little bit more than what is required, then we must make sure that our coping strategies are in place. So having a good night's rest, making sure having good work-life balance, keeping sure that you have enough time for leisure activities, entertainment, where your mind and brain gets enough relaxation, physical exercise, breathing exercises, mindfulness, all this as a combo together. Basically spending an hour and a half on yourself every day. There is no escape from that. And if we are thinking there's an escape from that, then we're just being completely wrong, because then we know where we are headed. It's, with so many stress-related illnesses and so much. I mean, come on, look at the number of cardiac arrests we've seen in the 40s in the last year itself. They've come to the forefront because they're all people who are celebs. But otherwise, so we all know in the hospital what is in the hospitals, what is going on with the number of, look at the way, the number of cases of hypertension are going up in young adults. So having said that, if we are not going to take charge, then we are just being like the ostrich with the head in the sand.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we are just on the cusp of 9, and hence I would request our Honorable President, Dr. Sangeet Gawale, to summarize and give the vote of thanks on the behalf of the Bombay Orthopedic Society.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for sparing this precious hour of yours in the evening. And I hope everybody goes back home and develop some good work-life balance, and you go home and appreciate the people who are waiting for you after this today in the evening, and have a nice joyous meal with them. It's effectively, we are only talking about gratitude now. If we cannot be present in the moment, and if we cannot be grateful for what we have, I think then we are really doing something wrong, because like I said, the pandemic was here to press a pause button for us to relook, refresh, rejuvenate, and rework our value system. And if we have not been able to do that, then there is something wrong. We really need to relook and rework ourselves, not only at an individual level, but even as a population.
Thank you so much for giving us time,
Thank you.
precious time. At 11th hour, we could manage to get you here on this
Not at all.
platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I also thank Agnivesh for being the webmaster of this event.